Welcome to our summary on mutations. So when we're referring to a mutation, what we're actually referring to is a change in the base sequence in the DNA. So if you ever get asked what is a mutation, that's the phrasing to use, a change in the base sequence in the DNA. It's not something that happens to turtles in sewers, and it's not something that happens to humans overnight to give us amazing powers, unfortunately. It's something rather more mundane. So when we're thinking about when these mutations can occur, the answer is anytime. So sometimes when your DNA is replicating, it just occurs as an error in your DNA replication. But your chance of a mutation will increase if you're exposed to doses of ionizing radiation, and one of the best examples of that is ultraviolet or UV, or if you're exposed to certain chemicals, things like benzene and ethanol, for example. Now, what we actually see as a result of these mutations is that we can get genetic variation. So what we actually find is that when that mutation has taken place within the DNA, it's actually created a different version of an allele. So that then leads to greater variation within a population. Now, what we find is that if these mutations occur, then there could be three potential outcomes. The first one is that there's no effect on the phenotype whatsoever. The second is that it can have an influence on it, or the third one is it can actually determine the phenotype, and that's the one that leads to variation within a species. So when we're thinking about these mutations, then what we find is that they fall into three categories. You've got the harmful mutations, the beneficial mutations, and then ones we refer to as neutral mutations, so the ones that have neither harm nor benefit. So if we consider some of these examples, if we look at harmful mutations first of all, then the most common harmful mutation we get is the one that leads to cancer. So what we find in cancer is that body cells are actually growing and dividing in an uncontrolled manner. Other harmful mutations that we could get could cause abnormal channel proteins. Now, the channel proteins are the ones that actually go across the cell membrane that allow different things to move from the inside of the cell to the outside. And if that actual channel protein isn't the normal shape, this process won't take place. And an example of where that occurs is in cystic fibrosis, where you get that really thick, sticky mucus that builds up because that protein channel isn't right, and therefore we won't move the right ions. And the last harmful mutation that we can have is one that we see in sickle cell anemia, which is where your red blood cells actually have a different shape. So they're shaped like a sickle, so kind of like the crescent moon. And that's all down to the different protein that's being made in those red blood cells. If we consider some neutral mutations, so these are the ones that have no benefit nor harm to us, things like rolling your tongue, or if your earlobes are free or attached, it's not going to make any difference to your ability to survive, and it's certainly not going to have any harmful impact on your life. The last category, those beneficial mutations, one of the most common one that's not really beneficial to us as humans, but is certainly beneficial to the bacteria, is the development of antibiotic resistance. So that means that if you've got a bacterial infection, antibiotics won't necessarily kill it because it may be resistant to that particular antibiotic. A couple of other ones for humans there. So we had a mutation in a gene called FOXP2, and that actually gave us our speech, and the mutation in skin colour that actually allowed us to live in all the different regions around this planet safely.